Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Uh, Thank you all so much for being here. Um, Before we get started, we're going to hand it over to our interpretation team for a brief announcement. Hola a todos y gracias por estar aquí. Antes de comenzar, nos gustaría pasarle a la palabra a nuestro equipo de interpretación para un breve anuncio. Gracias.
Buenas tardes. En este espacio vamos a practicar la justicia del lenguaje proveyendo interpretación al español. En su núcleo, la justicia del lenguaje es el derecho que todos tenemos a comunicarnos en el idioma en el que nos sentimos más poderosos. Reconocemos las limitaciones de nuestra práctica hoy, ya que solo estaremos proveyendo interpretación al español. Y puede que haya otros idiomas o necesidades de acceso al idioma representados en la llamada.
Afternoon. We will be practicing language justice in this space by providing Spanish interpretation. At its core, language justice is the right we each have to communicate in the language in which we feel most powerful. We recognize the limitations of our practice as today we are only providing Spanish interpretation and there may be other languages and language access needs represented on this call.
Reconocemos que el idioma es un lugar de conexión, pero también es uno de trauma.
We recognize that language is a place of connection, but also a place of trauma.
Reconocemos el hecho de que las ciudades en las que vivimos y trabajamos están en tierras indígenas y que la colonización ha borrado miles de idiomas.
We recognize the fact that the cities where we live and work are in indigenous lands and that colonization has erased thousands of languages.
Reconocemos la pérdida de idiomas debido a la esclavitud y el hecho de que hoy muchos de nosotros no hablamos el idioma de nuestros ancestros.
We recognize the loss of languages due to slavery and the fact that today many of us do not speak the language of our ancestors.
La justicia del lenguaje está enraizada en una historia de resistencia por comunidades y pueblos cuyas voces han sido silenciadas por generaciones. Y practicar la justicia del lenguaje es enfocarnos en la descolonización y en un enfoque sanador al idioma.
Language justice is rooted in a history of resistance by communities and peoples whose voices have been silenced for generations. And to practice language justice is to focus on decolonization and a healing approach to language.
Practicar la justicia del lenguaje es la responsabilidad de todos. Como tal, les pedimos que hayan de su parte hablando lenta y claramente, teniendo en cuenta que el español es 30% más largo que el inglés.
Practicing language justice is everyone's responsibility. As such, we ask that you do your part by speaking slowly and clearly, keeping in mind that Spanish is 30% longer than English.
Si nos escuchas en español, puede que te sorprenda escuchar algunas palabras terminando en E, que usualmente terminan en A o en O. Esto no es un error, sino parte de nuestro compromiso a usar lenguaje inclusivo y practicar la justicia de género.
If you're listening in Spanish, you might be surprised to hear some words ending in an E that usually end in an A or an O. This is not a mistake. It is part of our commitment to using inclusive language and to practicing gender justice.
Una vez se encienda la función de interpretación de Zoom, va a aparecer un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Hacen clic en este globo y seleccionan su idioma y pueden poner en silencio el audio original. Le pedimos que a menos que sean completamente bilingües, escojan un idioma para escuchar el webinario.
Once the interpretation feature is enabled, there will be a small globe at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to select your language channel, either English or Spanish. Unless you are fully bilingual, you must select the channel.
Si estás en un teléfono celular o tableta, no vas a ver ese globo. En vez, vas a los tres puntitos que dicen More o Más y seleccionas tu idioma y entonces puedes poner en silencio el audio original. Tienes entonces que poner el botón que dice finalizar para asegurarte que estés en el canal correcto.
If you're on a cell phone or a tablet or on certain Zoom update versions, you will not see the globe. You will have to click on the three dots that say more and select language interpretation from the drop-down menu. Then you'll be able to select your language and you must click done. Otherwise, you won't finish the process of going into the channel.
En adición a los canales de interpretación, vamos a estar compartiendo la pantalla con diapositivas en inglés o en español. Van a ir a la parte superior donde están las diapositivas y van a seleccionar que están viendo las diapositivas en inglés o en español. Hay un botón que aprietan que dice English Slides para las diapositivas en inglés y diapositivas en español para las diapositivas en español.
We will also be sharing the slides today in both English and Spanish, so you can already hover your mouse over the screen at the top of the screen and see which slides you are viewing. It will say either English slides or diapositivas for Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you. I am turning interpretation on now.
We would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us for the introduction of the 5 dimensions of inside-outside strategy to the world. If you haven't done so already, please click the globe at the bottom of your screen to select the language you would like to experience this webinar in. My name is Asamia. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Bridging Program Associate at Human Impact Partners. We invite attendees to share a bit about yourselves in the chat. And while you all introduce yourselves, we felt it was important to share the lens we each bring to this work. I currently live on Lenape land, also known as New York City, and I am from the Bronx specifically. My background is in youth work and organizing, mainly around abolition, education, housing, and issues that impact New Yorkers. I've also had the privilege of spending many years conducting organizing trainings and building with power building organizations across the country. I believe deeply in people power, and I'm inspired by the ways we are able to build and flex that power across various arenas of change. Now I will pass the mic to my colleague, Selma.
Thanks, Asamia. Hi, everyone. My name is Selma. I go by they, she pronouns. I live and work on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone people, also known as Oakland, California. I am a community organizer by trade and was introduced to the public health field while engaging in prevention and narrative change efforts on the ground. I am a firm believer in the intersection of organizing and public health, that to truly be aligned, we must lean into strategic risk and critical discomfort. When we are able to completely commit to transformation, to radically reconnect our mind, body, and soul, to see one another as whole and full humans, it is only then will we see the world we envision come to fruition. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Julian.
Thanks, y'all. Hi, everyone. My name is Julian. I use he and they pronouns. I live on Narragansett, Wampanoag, and Pokanoket lands in the place now known as Providence, Rhode Island. I also came to public health through the world of community organizing. Specifically, I was part of an environmental justice organization in Providence that was working on toxic sites and contaminated lands, on air quality and asthma. And that led me to learn about the field of public health. I eventually took a job at the Rhode Island Department of Health, where I worked for 8 years, first in the asthma program, and later, once COVID hit, a health equity leadership role in the COVID response, and was so deeply grateful to learn so much around how the public health world is talking about some of the same things, maybe using different language, but talking about very similar things, about how our health is shaped by where we live, work, play, and pray, as people say in the EJ world. So I'm grateful to be here today. I'm the Bridging Program Director at HIP, and really excited to be sharing this labor of love with you all. We've been working on this for over 2 years, and so excited to share with you. Next, I'll pass my mic to our co-director, Lily, to share a few words.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be with you today. Thank you, Selma, Asami, and Julian for hosting the space, to all the HIP staff and the interpretation staff in the background who are supporting us. Appreciate you. I'm one of HIP's 2 co-directors, Lily Farhang. I'm also joining from the ancestral lands of the Ohlone people, aka Berkeley, California. And the team asked me to join and just share some words and thoughts kind of about the importance of focusing at this intersection of governmental public health and community power building at this particular political moment. And so I'm going to do that. You know, as my dad says, I'm going to try to share some words of confusion with you. And so I think it bears, it's important to say that for years and years, HIP has been interested and committed to cultivating deeper relationships across grassroots organizing and governmental public health movements and sectors. We're committed to this idea that government should be for the people, needs to be accountable to communities. We've talked for a long time at HIP about the importance of communities having governing power, not just through the electoral arena, but actually through the administrative arena, aka governmental public health. We see the administrative arena as a sphere of influence and power for communities to achieve, you know, their dreams, also known as policy and systems change. And this has been, you know, a longstanding commitment of HIP's. And, you know, today, in this moment, that vision feels so far from what's possible. Like I personally, day in and day out, understand how hard that is. And then organizationally, it's hard. What we're seeing at the federal level right now, you know, is state power and control being exerted in ways to delegitimize our institutions, to put people's lives at risk in very real ways. And of course, I think it's important, like that kind of illiberalism has always had a place in this country's politics. It's not the first time in history that our government is using the tools of the state to target people, communities, political ideologies, activists. You know, you think back to Native expulsion, slave patrols and Jim Crow, the Red Scare that was waged against leftists, Japanese internment. All of these are examples of this push-pull of our country's illiberal versus kind of liberal currents that have been with us. And it behooves us to remember that, I think, in these moments of mass firings and funding cuts and DOGE and demonizing government workers. We've seen these pieces before, though not in my lifetime as a leader and not at this level of chaos in quite this way. And so while there's much to learn from history, there's this moment of like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm glad to be doing it with a group of people who are committed, I think, to organizing and mobilizing in response. And I think all of that said, HIP is committed to not letting go of a positive pro-social vision of government that we all want and deserve. We're not going to give up and yield on that vision and terrain. We still want to embody a bold, affirmative vision of public health that is rooted in democracy, dignity, and belonging, and we refuse to give that up. And so as we like experience the morass, you know, collectively and individually, I think that's, you know, what I want to offer you today is that this work, our bridging program, the inside-outside strategy work we're going to highlight, it is trying to hold on to this kernel of we can have a transformative vision of government where government can act as an agent of care, where it can be accountable, particularly at the local level. And so as far away as that vision and feeling might feel right now, we're asking you to think about that long arc of democracy and of the necessity of cultivating and nurturing these kind of partnerships to show that transformation is possible. And before I pass it back to Selma, thanks so much for, you know, like I said, sharing my confusion with you. I want to shout out the amazing funders who've allowed us the space to experiment with these ideas and be creative, specifically Erica Brown and Monica Valdes Lupi from the Kresge Foundation, and Monique Shaw and Melody Tullier from RWJF. Thank you so much for your support. That, RWJF and Kresge, like they've supported this work. They're not endorsing the content in the webinar, all of those, caveats. But I did want to honor them and speak their names in the space. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Selma to get us going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lily, for your words and starting us out today. I'm excited to share a little background on the work that led us here today. HIP launched the Bridging Partnerships and Strategies program in 2022 with a clear purpose: to build deep and trusting relationships between health departments and community organizers, with the ultimate goal of supporting community power building. When we say bridging, we don't mean finding some safe, centrist middle ground. Bridging to us is something far more powerful and transformative. It means working across two very different types of settings, organizations, power dynamics, and ways of doing things, and still finding a path to shared goals and meaningful collaboration. Bridging is about organizing within and outside of institutions. It's about taking real risks. It's about leveraging the power we have and building new power together to accomplish what our communities need. This kind of work is not easy. Bridging requires an inside-outside strategy. It demands that we learn to work with power, not just around it. And it asks us to be comfortable and skillful when facing conflict and contradiction. Through our Power Building Partnerships for Health initiative, we have had the privilege of facilitating cohorts made up of health departments and community power building organizations working together in this spirit. The 5 dimensions of inside-outside strategy, which we'll explore today with you, grew directly out of this work. They represent our effort to capture what we've learned and to offer it back to all of you, the people doing this work every day and on the ground together. Thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this work. Building off of what we just shared about bridging, I want to be clear about the context this work comes from. The 5 dimensions grew out of a particular focus: building partnerships between public health agencies and community power building organizations. It is important to know this isn't beginner level material. There are many great resources out there for people just getting started, but this is different. We've created it for practitioners, for people like you who are already deep in this work, who understand the realities of social movements, organizing, and institutional power. While our experience is rooted in public health, we believe these ideas can absolutely be adapted to other settings, wherever community organizers are working with agencies that hold institutional power. Our goal here is to make the implicit explicit, to be upfront about the context of this work, and to speak directly to that experience. And in doing so, to hopefully offer tools that resonate far beyond it. Awesome. Inside-outside strategy is at the heart of the work we're talking about today. We define it as a collaboration between public health departments working from the inside and community power building organizations pushing from the outside. Together, the aim is simple but powerful: to improve material conditions for our communities by aligning and leveraging different forms of power. Inside-outside strategy isn't just about one group supporting the other. It's about each party using its unique power, voice, and resources to achieve a shared goal. The ultimate measure of success isn't just partnership either. It's building policies, systems, and practices that directly make people's lives better. Now, inside-outside strategy isn't a fixed formula. It's a flexible and dynamic approach that adapts to political and social conditions we are operating in. And that's important because the context always matters. Tactics, plural, are key here. There isn't one right way to do this work. There are many different ways to build and practice inside-outside strategy. And it involves a creative process of trial and error, learning and growth. When the political environment is favorable, inside-outside strategy can drive progressive policy victories, wins that expand the boundaries of what we thought was possible. But even in more hostile conditions, when equity, justice, and public health institutions are under attack, inside-outside strategy remains a vital tool. It helps us defend our communities, protect rights, and safeguard the hard-fought wins we've already achieved. That's why this work is not just strategic, it's essential. Today, we're excited to introduce the 5 dimensions of inside-outside strategy, a structured guide designed to help individuals, groups, and partnerships do this work more intentionally and effectively. The 5 dimensions help us analyze our unique contexts, assess challenges and opportunities, and develop tactics that are responsive to real-world conditions. Again, there is no single right way to engage in inside-outside strategy. The 5 dimensions offer a common language and a set of tools to strengthen partnerships and sharpen our impact. Each dimension can be explored individually, but they are deeply interconnected and evolve together over time. We present them sequentially to show how one dimension builds on another, but in practice, this work is layered, circular, and mutually reinforcing. At its core, the 5 dimensions framework focuses on 5 essential elements. First, in the middle and foundational to the work is nourish your relationships, fostering trust and building strong networks at individual, interpersonal, and organizational levels. Second, deepen your leadership, cultivating leadership that shifts and shares power both individually and collectively. Third, build your capacity, creating resilient organizational structures that can sustain power building and health equity work over the long haul. Fourth, navigate your political landscape, assessing external power dynamics to recognize allies, opponents, opportunities, and threats. And finally, hone your analysis, building a shared understanding of root causes and aligning around strategy and tactics for transformative change. The dimensions are not a checklist. They are cyclical and iterative, growing and adapting as partnerships face new challenges and new possibilities. When practiced together, the 5 dimensions offer a powerful, flexible guide for advancing real systemic change. We will spend the next portion of our presentation giving a brief overview of the dimensions and their companion tools.
Thank you so much, Selma, for introducing these 5 dimensions and laying out what we mean by bridging and inside-outside strategy. In this next section, we're going to share a few samples to give you a taste of each of these 5 dimensions. When you open the guide, and the link for the materials are now in the chat, you'll see that each dimension has its own section with key questions, a detailed description about power, and examples of applying it to both the inside and the outside. Let's jump in. Starting with dimension 1, nourish your relationships. We center relationships because they are the foundation of inside-outside strategy. Building relationships focuses on the who is involved, those inside and those outside government, forming a partnership. Ultimately, inside-outside strategy comes down to the people and the strength of the connections between them. It's not about playing a numbers game. Emphasize quality over quantity. Cindy Suarez reminds us that power is fundamentally relational. Shifting power involves shifting from relationships of supremacist power over to liberatory relationships of power with. It requires emotional intelligence and trust to navigate the power dynamics, risks, and conflicts that are always inherent to this work. This dimension is about finding your people and growing supportive networks. The key questions we look at in this dimension are who is involved on the inside and the outside, how well do they know and trust each other, and are there any tensions or conflicts that need to be worked through? We emphasize the organizational level for applying the dimensions to the different contexts of the inside and the outside. On the inside, the relationships dimension applies to navigating relational dynamics with both community and other governmental agencies, building a healthy and respectful workplace culture, and earning trust to share power with community. On the outside, the focus is on the relationships of organizing and base building that develop community power. From that central point, organizational relationships include coalitions and strategic relationships with government allies. As always, strong relationships are sustained and deepened through generative conflict resolution. So after establishing the who in the relationships dimension, the leadership dimension adds on organizational positions that they hold and their ability to leverage and shift power through their roles and work together. Leadership can mean many different things, and this dimension includes both leadership positions in a hierarchy as well as bottom-up collective leadership. Who is in leadership roles and how they use their power has a huge impact on organizations and partnerships. Some inside-outside partnerships include really good leaders who are skilled at using their power and support and protect the people doing the work on the ground. Sometimes the people in leadership roles need to be convinced and won over. And other times, inside-outside strategy means maneuvering around an unsupportive person who's in a position of authority and using collective leadership and organizing from the bottom up. But in any situation, effective inside-outside strategy needs to be intentional about who is in which leadership positions and whether they are supportive and trusted. The key questions to ask yourself are, what positions are you in to leverage your power? Do you have the support from people in other positions of power? And what inside or outside organizing is needed to shift and build power? On the inside, there are very defined hierarchies and positions with varying levels of access to authority and information. Public sector workers within government agencies know that leadership transitions with new elected officials appointing new agency leaders can be tumultuous times. There is an important set of skills and practices to learn how to develop leadership and flex positional power within those inside settings. It includes learning how and when to take strategic risks while having a clear moral compass and being accountable to communities. These are especially trying times for people doing equity and justice work within government. Now more than ever, leadership requires finding ways to protect that work and the people who are doing it. On the outside, in movement settings, the emphasis is leadership development as a collective goal. Organizations need to build leadership that is grounded in their base and build up movements and organizations that are leaderful. movement organizations and leaders need to be accountable to their communities, to know whether and how to work with government agencies and inside allies in a strategic way. And now Dimension 3, moving from the who of relationships and leadership, capacity turns to the internal structures of organizations. In this dimension, we look at the what. What resources are available to work with? What structures are we working within? And what are the barriers we have to reckon with as we work to make change together? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that power properly understood is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. Based on that, achieving purpose and building power requires real capacity. Capacity can be grown over time to create organizations that nourish and support their people and their work. When institutions get too rigid and create barriers, building capacity might look like finding creative ways to break down those barriers and be more effective. Ultimately, capacity is what organizations need to be resilient and sustainable in their power building and health equity work over the long haul. The key questions in this dimension are what strengths and capacity can be used to advance your work, what gaps need to be filled, what barriers are preventing progress, and can you break down those barriers or find a way around them? Strong infrastructure is essential for sustainable power building and health equity work, but that infrastructure can look very different on the inside or the outside. On the inside, it means building and defending the equity infrastructure in government, which can include things like staffing, data, funding, or decision-making powers. It's difficult and slow work to build equity infrastructure that's responsive to community. And today we're seeing these unprecedented attacks, mass firings, and rapid dismantling of essential programs and systems that have been built. While we still need to challenge the unsupportive barriers of bureaucracy, we also need to protect the parts of government that are essential for community. On the outside, building community power means growing movement infrastructure. This includes things ranging from physical spaces and financial sustainability to coalitions and networks, and the ability to do base building and practice self and community care. Funding cuts have put many community organizations in extremely precarious positions. And as we seek to build effective social movement institutions, we also need to challenge the barriers and the shortcomings of the nonprofit industrial complex. I'm now going to pass the mic to Asamia to take us through the last two dimensions.
Thanks, Julian. Before I walk us through the last two dimensions, I just want to vocalize some of the reminders that we are dropping in the chat for folks who join late. Please look at the bottom of your screen for the globe icon to select the language you would like to experience this webinar in. And at the top of your screen, you can select either English or Spanish slides. And a reminder to add any questions you have using the Q&A function as well. Alrighty, so our fourth dimension, navigate your political landscape. While capacity look internally within organizations, with this dimension, we look externally to the political landscape where the inside-outside strategy work is playing out. Depending on where you are located, your political landscape can be extremely difficult. We live in a country marked by deep divisions along partisan, urban, rural, and state lines. But structural racism, capitalism, patriarchy, ableism, genocidal imperialism, and other systems of oppression aren't constrained to a single political party, region, or a group of people. People organizing within social movements for collective liberation and authentic multiracial democracy from the bottom up know that building community power is necessary everywhere. The political landscape is affected by which party is in control, but in any scenario, there is a mix of threats and opportunities with movement building work. This dimension is about the skills of knowing how to read, analyze, and operate within your particular landscape with all its local politics and power players. The key questions for this dimension are, what are the opportunities and threats in your political landscape? Who are your allies and opponents? When viewed from the inside versus the outside, is the political landscape different or the same? On the inside, navigating your political landscape means understanding and leveraging the unique positionalities health agencies have access to. Individuals in leadership roles, for example, directors or health officers, typically handle direct political interactions. This direct access can be leveraged to advance health equity. Additionally, while government staff are often advised to avoid being political, public health work is inherently political. Staff will often need to think creatively about ways to exert political influence within these boundaries. On the outside, through power mapping and other practices, organizers are often identify the opposition, the allies, and who has the power to meet their demands. These questions serve as a reminder for organizers to constantly be aware of who are the folks most aligned with their campaigns and who may need to be moved or organized against. Additionally, power-building organizations are often guided by a transformative vision of society. When in partnership with government, organizers need to push their government allies to also challenge the status quo within their departments in service of a more transformative vision. So last, but certainly not least, we're at our fifth dimension, hone your analysis. So while analysis is the final step, it is also the precondition for collaboration. When we talk about analysis, we're talking about an iterative cycle of learning and making decisions to take action. This dimension involves clarifying the why through shared understanding of the root causes of inequities and getting aligned around a shared vision of what strategy and goals to pursue. Honing your analysis means building off and integrating the information from the previous dimensions to sharpen your analysis and to guide your next steps. We understand that everyone comes into a shared effort with an individual or organizational analysis, but coming to a genuinely shared analysis requires time and effort. And some questions to support this work include, do you have an understanding of the root causes? A shared understanding of the root causes? Do you have a shared understanding of past or ongoing harms? Is there alignment around a shared vision of what action should be taken and by whom? So great to see the affirmations coming in the chat. On the inside, honing your analysis means, next slide, please. Thank you. On the inside, honing your analysis means building a shared understanding of health equity through ongoing training, professional development, and spaces for unlearning. It also requires communicating a clear health equity analysis while recognizing the importance of partnering with local community organizers. It's also important to note that effective health equity work requires understanding the strategic value of intentional partnership with community organizers, and honing analysis through the process of taking real action. So we mean, don't just talk about it, let's actually be about it. And on the outside, power building organizations should have a clear vision and a theory of, should develop a clear vision and a theory of change alongside members of their organization and their base, with perspectives on government as a strategic arena for engagement. Political education can be crucial for power building organizations to help demystify how government works and to empower organizers when working within this arena. To re-emphasize, although the 5 dimensions are presented sequentially, so they build upon each other in an iterative way, the dimensions are cyclical. Developing a shared analysis strengthens the relationships, which is the center of the 5 dimensions, that are needed for partnerships to step into strategic and essential aligned action. By fostering mutual trust, understanding, and strategic alignment, public health agencies and social justice movements can work together to build a future where health equity and racial justice are not just aspirations, but are realities. Now I will pass the mic to Julian to introduce the tools and resources that can be found within the 5 Dimensions Toolkit.
Thank you so much, Asamia. So now, there is some additional content and resources and lots of material that you can find in the rest of the main 5 Dimensions guide that we've just walked through. It includes some other existing materials that our organization has produced, as well as others and partners, and materials that we think are relevant and useful for inside-outside strategy. But since today's webinar is just a short introduction and not a full workshop or training, we're going to switch it up now and jump into our second resource, the 5 Dimensions Toolkit. This toolkit is a companion resource that contains a set of tools that you can use to apply the 5 dimensions to your work in different ways. While the first document that we just went through laid out our ideas and theories about the 5 dimensions and inside-outside strategy and the context that we're in, this second document is more about praxis and practical tools to apply the framework to the unique conditions of you and your community and your work. There are many different ways to develop and practice inside-outside strategy. As we said earlier, it's a creative process of trial and error, finding which tactics might be right for your current context, and then learning and growing as conditions change. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and we can't tell you what will work best for you. What we're doing is offering the 5 dimensions framework to guide your process and sharing some tools and resources that you can use along the way. But ultimately, it's your journey to collectively create with those who you are working with. The toolkit is designed to be used by both inside and outside actors. So whether you work within a governmental public health department or a community power building organization, or if you want to adapt these tools for a different kind of inside-outside setting. These tools can help you assess your current position, navigate challenges, and build more effective strategies for collaboration. We're going to give you a very quick tour of each of the tools, including which pages to find them on. So the first tool in this kit is a screening grid, and it's used to identify your starting point. It's a simple 2x2 grid arranged by readiness of the inside and the outside partners. The starting end for both is an individual or small team that wants to jump in around inside-outside strategy, even if they might have limited organizational support or infrastructure, or might be feeling isolated in their work. On the opposite quadrant, there are established partnerships that have active teams ready for inside-outside strategy. The other 2 quadrants are for groups that are either primarily inside or primarily outside, meaning there's one of the sides that has an active and ready group, but not on the other. Based on which of these best fits your situation, the screening grid then offers some brief recommendations and a short list of relevant tools and some resources to start with. And you'll notice that each of the links within the toolkit will hyperlink internally and take you to the pages directly to make it easier to use. Next, we have self-reflection questions. So we designed the 5 dimensions to support group processes primarily, but everyone engaged with this work comes from their own unique position and perspective. So regardless of whether you're part of a group, inside, outside, strategy, process, and partnership, you can still use the 5 dimensions to think about your own personal role, your relationship to your organization, and to your broader community. This tool is just what it sounds like. A simple set of self-reflection questions that individual people can use as journal prompts for open-ended thinking about your work and your purpose. It can be a good place to start or a tool to turn to in moments of transition or uncertainty. So next up, as the name says, this next tool is a set of worksheets to develop a snapshot of inside-outside strategy using the 5 dimensions. The tool is designed for active campaigns. It can be used at different stages of a campaign and revisited as conditions and strategies evolve. While it could potentially be used by an individual person wanting to reflect on this work, we recommend engaging with this tool as a group to best support deeper thinking, dialogue, and shared planning for transformational change through collective action. These are just a few samples of what these worksheets look like. Don't worry about trying to read the very small text on this slide. You can download the tool directly from our website, open it up, and engage with it. As a quick overview, there is one worksheet for each of the 5 dimensions, and each worksheet builds off of the previous ones. The instructions on each page will walk you through the activities. They're meant to be printed and written on, or you could even replicate these diagrams on butcher paper during a shared strategy meeting. For those of you who are already familiar with power mapping, you can think of this as an additional 5 dimensions adaptation to a classic power map that can be used for coordinating roles in inside-outside strategy, getting everyone on the same page, and identifying actions and who will be doing what. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Selma to take us through the rest of this toolkit.
Awesome. Thank you, Julian. The conflict identification tool. Conflict is common in equity work and justice work, and how we engage with it really determines whether it could be destructive or transformative. Proactively working through conflict means not just reacting, but really identifying what's happening and digging into root causes. And so we developed this conflict identification tool that uses the 5 dimensions to help pinpoint common sources of conflict that can arise in inside-outside strategy work, and to support partnerships in moving through it with strength and clarity. Finally, last but not least, it's the assessment tools user guide. The assessment tool process is the most in-depth and comprehensive way to engage with the 5 dimensions of inside-outside strategy. The process starts with individual reflection worksheets completed by staff from both the community power building organization and the health department. From there, teams move on to a combined organizational assessment and finally into a facilitated discussion between partners to strategize together across organizations. Because this process is designed to spark deep reflection and real dialogue, there are a few things to consider before jumping in. Some questions are: who will participate and in what roles? What is the time commitment that everyone has? And how will facilitation, coordination, and potential conflict be handled when it arises? Again, This isn't a quick checklist. Rather, it's a powerful layered process to support long-term transformational partnerships. There's a ton more information in the user guide and the process. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. But for now, I will pass it over to Asamia for the next portion of our time together.
Thanks, Selma. We're about to shift into our panel discussion, but I think it's really important to take a moment to celebrate the 5 dimensions. It was truly a labor of love that took years and years and years, and is rooted in a commitment to true social change. And I think, y'all dropped some love and things in the chat because we just shared it with y'all, and we're really proud of this product. Alrighty, now let's get into something really exciting, our panel discussion for today. Early on, we described the many years it took to create the 5 dimensions. We'd be remiss not to also mention the role of our amazing advisory group of over a dozen inside-outside practitioners who dedicated close to a year sharing their insights, feedback, questions, and ideas, and who played a huge role in the creation of this resource and toolkit. Today, we are joined by 4 brilliant members of our advisory group, and we're really excited to transition to our panel conversation. In a minute, we will begin introducing our panelists, and we invite attendees to share questions and comments using the Q&A feature. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to thank Monica Valdes Lupi, Sunni Hutton, and Dr. Teofilo Reyes and Dr. Jamila Porter for joining us today. For the first section of our panel discussion, we will introduce each panelist and ask them to share a bit about their experience with inside and or outside work. And Monica, I'm going to introduce you first to kick us off. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Monica joined the Kresge Foundation as the Managing Director for Health in September of 2020. With over 25 years of experience in public health, she spearheads the foundation's initiatives to create equity-focused health systems. Monica collaborates with various teams within Kresge to promote equity and partners with communities to enhance well-being through equitable food policy development, climate justice, leadership development, and community safety. Previously, Monica was a senior fellow at the Beaumont Foundation, where she advised on policy initiatives addressing critical public health issues, including tobacco control, racial justice, and health equity. She also served as a senior advisor to the CDC Foundation during the COVID-19 pandemic, guiding efforts to identify and support gaps in local health departments' responses and recovery activities. Prior to these roles, Monica was the executive director of the Boston Public Health Commission, overseeing a portfolio that included the city's emergency medical services, the largest homeless services program in New England, school-based health centers, and other essential public health services. She served as the deputy commissioner for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, managing day-to-day operations across public health hospitals and various regulatory bodies. Additionally, she was the first chief program officer for health system transformation at the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, where she led efforts on health equity, Medicaid and public health partnerships, state health policy, and public health informatics. Monica is a member of the advisory committee for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and previously co-chaired the Health Equity Work Group. She holds a JD from the Dickinson School of Law and an MPH from the Boston University School of Public Health and a BA from Bryn Mawr College. Monica, welcome. If you can share with us your experience on either the inside and or the outside.
Thank you, Asamia, and so excited to be joined on this panel by my colleagues that you see, and a little embarrassed about that intro, Asamia, but when I was thinking about this question and what I might be able to share is that what you heard in terms of where I spent the majority of my time was that I was a professional insider, right? So I spent about 20 of those years working in both local and state health, public health departments, and then with ASTHO. And so definitely the perspectives that I would share are from that time as an insider. And when I think about being an insider and where I really learned about inside-outside strategy, it really was when I was at the Boston Public Health Commission, and there was some work in between. But a couple takeaways and lessons that I'd share from that experience of working at a city health department. First, when I started, and I'm going to date myself, in the late 90s, I didn't have a title that brought any authority in terms of the work that I did. I was a policy analyst who happened to be working in the commissioner's office, which was then led at the time by John Auerbach, which I imagine many of you public health colleagues know. John, and then Barbara Ferrer, who's now at LA County. She was our deputy, and John Rich was our medical director. So, lesson number one I would share as an insider from my own experience was the gift of being mentored and having a leadership team that believed in equity, in social justice, and the power of communities in terms of health. So that's lesson number one. Also, on the insider experience, I would share that it's important that during this time that I was at the health department, when I started and when I returned, was the important role of communities and making sure that we centered communities and building ways to use our superhero powers inside as a health department in service of the community partners in the ways that we were thinking about different levers to transform policies, practices, and systems that would be durable and address the long-standing health inequities and racism that we knew our communities were facing every day in life in the city. And then the other, the third kind of lesson I would share is a whole of department approach to the work. And so, the things that we were able to do by centering communities touched every aspect from the data that we collected. So really changing the ways in which we would go to neighborhood meetings, showing up with, you know this, the public health folks, many slides about all the health disparities and the inequities, and trying to think differently about showing community, how we were showing community assets and resources that we could tap into and integrate into the work, to the training that we did. So this is 16 years. This is like long-term development of muscles. So being able to train all of our staff and requiring it, not just for the health equity folks, but everyone, to make sure that everyone knew that they played a really important role. And I'm going to be honest, not everyone shared that worldview with the leadership team or the health equity folks or the folks who just this came naturally to them. So being able to train everyone so it became everyone's job. And then in examples where we were able to integrate equity into the way that we did business. So we borrowed from other places in terms of equitable procurement policies, our tobacco control work, just making sure that we were, building also a health equity advisory committee for our Board of Health and ensuring that communities were working alongside. I think it was an evolution, and I want to make sure that other panelists have enough time. So I'll just stop there because I know that through our stories and sharing that we're going to learn more about like practical ways to integrate the tools and the different approaches. So I'll hand back to you, Asamia.
I got it. Thanks, Monica. Appreciate it. I have the pleasure of introducing Sunny Hutton into the chat. And so, hey Sunny, I'm gonna read out uh your bio. Sunni Hutton is co-director and fundraising and grants management at So Joy People's Fund. Sunny is a community organizer with deep experience in helping translate between technical experts and community residents with a focus on elevating community views and voices. She became involved in tenant organizing in 2018 when a bedbug outbreak occurred in her building. She organized with her neighbors to have a mass meeting, and they decided that no one will have to go through this again. So they adopted the Homes for All model and started the Homes for All St. Louis, a coalition dedicated to catalyzing tenant association across the metropolitan area and improving housing quality. She is an education professional with a background in human and organizational development and policy. Sunny is skilled in project management and evaluation, strategic planning, community engagement, large group facilitation, and resource development. Her projects over the last few years range from organizing renters and institutional stakeholders in the St. Louis region into a coalition that builds tenant associations, leveraging an EPA environmental justice grant to build community and government capacity through a collaborative problem-solving model addressing environmental injustices. In recent years, Sunny has brought in over 3.7 million in funding to Black-led communities, to Black-led community-based organizations in the St. Louis region. Thanks, Vero. Sunny holds a Bachelor's of Science degree from Vanderbilt University in Policy and Human and Organizational Development, and a Master's of Education from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. She is a former classroom teacher. When she is not working, her focus is her family, since she is the fifth of six kids born and raised in St. Louis. As a native, Sunny knows that people are what makes St. Louis a great place to live, and it is the people who have the power to change St. Louis for the better. Hey, Sunny. Would love for you to share your experience, what your experience has been with the inside and or the outside.
Yeah, it's great to be with y'all today. My experience with the inside outside strategy, as you were talking, Selma, I was like, oh, I've been doing this. Because that EPA collaborative problem solving project that we did was bringing together residents. And because I worked for the Community Development Corporation at the time, so we represented 5 neighborhoods on the South Side. So bringing together residents in collaboration with city departments to try to address waste management issues in our community. We had a lot of illegal dumping, and we were like, we got to figure this out. But that was my first time, dipping my toe in the inside outside strategy. But more recently, through a collaborative research effort with Homes for All St. Louis, which is now Tenants Transforming Greater St. Louis, Human Impact Partners, my faves, my besties, and then the Vacancy Collaborative, the City of St. Louis, and then also alongside residents, we conducted a geospatial analysis of socio-demographic factors, housing quality indicators, and health outcomes for 29 residential zip codes here in the city of St. Louis. And the purpose of this research was to share and contextualize resident stories alongside health and housing quality data here in our city. And then in the end, we presented solutions to the city and its stakeholders so that they can pursue and ensure a healthier St. Louis. That was one of my most recent experience with the inside outside strategy. And I'll put a link in the chat to that research, and then also to Tenants Transforming Greater St. Louis website, because y'all got to check them out.
Go ahead, Sunny, plug your folks. Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna introduce our next panelist. Teófilo Reyes is a labor strategist, participatory researcher, an equity-focused policy leader with over 20 years of advancing worker power across the U.S. and internationally. Most recently, he served as interim president of ROC United, where he guided the organization's shift from traditional advocacy to a grassroots organizing model focused on long-term power building. Under this model, workers organized restaurant unions in the Twin Cities and Washington, D.C. Michigan passed a statewide wage increase, and ROC launched a national network of affiliates advancing the Restaurant Workers' Bill of Rights. Previously, as ROC's National Research Director, Teófilo led over 45 participatory research projects that informed campaigns and policy. His landmark study, The Glass Floor, documented the link between the $2.13 tipped wage and sexual harassment, and helped shape the One Fair Wage campaign and catalyze a partnership with the U.S. Department of Labor's Women's Bureau. Teófilo's career spans movement journalism, international labor solidarity, and community organizing. He served as co-director of Labor Notes, North America director of TIE Global, and was a leader in both the Coalition for Justice and the Maquiladoras and a National Coalition for Dignity and Amnesty. He began organizing with the United Farm Workers in Chicago. He holds a PhD in comparative human development from the University of Chicago, where his research explored the neurobiology of cooperative behavior, and a BA in economics and Russian from the University of Michigan. He was also a visiting scholar and lecturer at UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy. Born in Carson City, Michigan, and raised in Mexico City, Teófilo is fluent in English, Spanish, and Russian. His work is rooted in the belief that those most affected by injustice must lead the fight to overcome it, and is committed to building multiracial, cross-class coalitions for transformative change. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please share with us your experience with either the inside and or the outside.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit about both. But first, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's been a pleasure participating in this process, and seeing the release of the toolkit is really exciting. And just looking at everyone in the chat, it's pretty exciting to be here and to be able to share this moment with everybody. So congratulations on that. You know, I'm because of this particular moment, I'm going to focus on our most recent inside-outside strategy at ROC United, which had to do with, as part of our efforts to build worker power, we were organizing workers to submit comments for regulations, for proposed regulations at the Department of Labor. And we built a campaign called Beat the Heat to pressure OSHA to adopt a strong heat standard that would include a strong standards for indoor workers, not just outdoor workers. A lot of the previous focus around heat standard been around outdoor workers, and we wanted to make sure indoor restaurant workers, in our case, were included. And so we organized thousands of workers to submit comments to OSHA. And in those comments, workers highlighted broken air conditioning systems in the middle of summer, lack of water cooling breaks, regular heat illness where they'd be vomiting on the job or fainting. And we were able to compile all these comments and publish these reports, publish these testimonies in a report to further educate policymakers and the public. Sorry, I think I was going too fast, so I'll try to talk a little slower. But this led us to, one, apply for and receive Susan Harwood funding to train workers on heat illness prevention through OSHA. And then we deepened our relationship with OSHA and co-hosted forums to build public awareness around heat illness for indoor workers, in particular as summers get hotter, heat waves get hotter, and workers become more and more impacted by climate change. We were able to hold a listening session with Secretary Julie Su and top OSHA officials at our office in New York, where restaurant workers spoke about their experiences. And it led in part to President Biden's executive order to move the OSHA heat standard forward. We also looked at gender-based violence and harassment with the Women's Bureau. As was mentioned, we look at the subminimum wage and the impact that has on sexual harassment. And there's a lot of states where workers are prevented from working towards raising the wage because of state preemption on city policies, right? So a city like New Orleans or Atlanta cannot raise the wage for any workers because the state does not allow them to. And so we looked at how can we work with the Women's Bureau to advance gender-based violence and harassment training as a tool to then build worker power and try to mitigate the effect of that and look at ways to then change policy, for example, mandating sexual harassment training for all workers. And we worked with both the Women's Bureau and OSHA to ensure that gender-based violence and harassment was seen as a workplace hazard as well. As part of the outside strategy in all of this, certainly mobilizing workers, but we were confronted most recently with the administration's executive orders saying that we had to cease all operations tied to illegal anti-DEI activities. And so we partnered with Democracy Forward, the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, AAUP, and City of Baltimore to challenge these orders in court. We got temporary restraining orders that allowed us to keep these programs running both with OSHA and with the Women's Bureau. And so that's something that's still in progress, but that's a key part of our outside strategy as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Teo. I'm jumping in now to introduce our fourth panelist. And y'all, this advisory group, these are 4 amazing people out of a group of, I think, 15 that helped us shape these tools. And we knew they were amazing. They're incredible to work with. And then we read these bios and it just blows me away every time. So thank you all for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. Dr. Jamila Porter is the Chief of Staff at the de Beaumont Foundation. She serves as the strategic advisor to the president and CEO of the foundation, works across teams to drive results throughout the foundation, and ensures that equity and justice are organizational priorities. Jamila is also the principal investigator of modernized anti-racist data ecosystems, or MADE, for health justice, an initiative accelerating the development of health-focused local data ecosystems that center the principles of anti-racism, equity, justice, and community power. An award-winning researcher and experienced executive, Jamila's work focuses on transforming the interconnected social, environmental, and power structures that impact health. She is an outspoken leader and public speaker on a range of issues, including social determinants of equity, transportation justice, multi-sector collaboration, policy evaluation, community power building, and public health practice. She has published articles in a variety of peer-reviewed journals, including the American Journal of Public Health, Health Equity, Journal of Multidisciplinary Evaluation, Journal of Public Health Management and Practice, and Journal of Transport and Land Use. Previously, Jamila was Director of Resilient Communities with the Big Cities Health Coalition, BCHC. There, she led BCHC's efforts to build healthy, resilient, and vibrant communities across our nation's largest cities by utilizing her expertise in racial justice, violence prevention, and policy. Prior to joining BCHC, Jamila was Director of Programs and Evaluation at the Safe States Alliance, a national professional association dedicated to strengthening the practice of injury and violence prevention. At the Safe States Alliance, she led the association's program, policy, and evaluation initiatives, including providing technical assistance and training to multi-sector organizations and practitioners at the local, state, and national levels. Jamila has also previously worked in the consulting and international development sectors. She earned her bachelor's degree in communication and health policy from Wake Forest University. She earned her Master of Public Health degree from Mercer University School of Medicine and her Doctor of Public Health degree from the University of Georgia College of Public Health. Welcome, Jamila, and tell us a bit about your experience with the inside and or outside.
Sure. Thank you so much, Julian, for that immensely kind introduction. And congratulations to you, Selma, Samia, the whole bridging team for it's just a joy to be here to celebrate the publication of the 5 Dimensions resources. So thank you so much for having me. I would say that my experience is very much one of being on the inside, as you heard from that bio. Although I've worked in philanthropy for the last 4 years, much of my career has been working with folks working in health departments. I've worked with folks working in state department injury and violence prevention programs, on programmatic work, on evaluations related to public health capacity, pedestrian safety, transportation policy, and violence prevention. I've also worked with city health department commissioners, so I've seen it at state and local levels. But I think the most impactful work that I've been able to do that really showcases the beauty of an inside-outside strategy is advocacy. So working for membership associations, you do get to do, and I learned on the job of doing advocacy work. So doing Hill visits, talking to policymakers and their staff, and being able to train folks who are working in health department settings and had often to take off work, right? They have to avoid any perception of lobbying, which they were not lobbying, they're just doing education, but even the perception becomes reality. So they had to take off work, go talk to their senators or their members of Congress and their staff as a citizen, but had to train them how to do this, how to talk about the work they do. Doing work that is public health work is really population focused, and it can be sometimes difficult for the average person to understand, like, how does that affect individual people in their lives and their families? And so being able to tell those stories. And in doing advocacy work and learning how to do it and learning how to teach other people how to do it, when it came talking to policymakers and their staff, we needed stories of constituents. And that really came from people working on the outside, community-based organizations doing power building work, doing work, community organizing work. And we just called them our partners. And so I really love how we are now really talking more strategically and intentionally about our quote partners are really our critical allies and co-conspirators in the work. And so those having stories from the community, quote unquote, our partners, that's what put the heart and humanity into the public health work that we were doing. And there's no way we would have had meaningful conversations with policymakers or anyone else who was a decision maker, or had the ability to shift policy without partners who were working on the outside and had their finger on the pulse of community needs and desires. And so for those of us who are classically trained public health practitioners like myself, this wasn't something that we learned in our academic settings. This is something we learned to do and value on the job. And so I would say it's really critical for those of us who are working on the inside. It is absolutely necessary for us to have partners and allies on the outside and have these strategic relationships. We cannot do our jobs without them. It is impossible. And having these inside-outside strategies are critical, not only to get policies adopted, we know that's important, assuring their implementation, but really to ensure that the powers that be, including ourselves, are held accountable. And I think that's really important to the nature of the inside-outside work.
Thank you, Jamila. Now we are going to shift into tailored questions that we have for all of our panelists. Monica, we are going to start with you again. In your experience and based on your insight to the current conditions we are facing, how can inside-outside strategy be used to defend public health? And Monica, before you go, I just want to encourage folks again to drop any questions you have in the Q&A feature, and we can get to them via email afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Samia. I think when I was thinking about this, I come into this response from being on a call earlier with a community partner, and something that they said has just stuck with me. So, they were describing like this moment in time in terms of public health, that we're in a time that we're seeing this suspension of institutions and processes that allow us to make sense in the world that we're living. And so, as painful as it is to see, so many things being destroyed at this time, that I think that this gives us, health departments and communities and everyone who works in communities, a chance to build new ways of governing that center community and allow everyone to really use their power and purpose and lean into that as a resource. When I was listening to you all talk about the toolkit and the visual, where the first dimension is really focused on relationships, I think now more than ever, we need to work on, if you haven't, start on building those relationships. And as you pointed out in the tools, in the resources, really building the trust in the networks that we have, both at the individual, interpersonal, and organizational levels. And I think that in terms of inside outside strategies, it's not just in terms of public health defense. So the way that we've described it at the foundation, and as shielding and fortifying in this moment of time. But looking at the future, how are we aligning and sustaining and with communities using the inside outside strategies to strengthen a shared vision, strengthen those relationships, and on both the inside and the outside, the infrastructures that are going to be necessary to sustain not only the relationships, but actually use this moment to think differently about how we coordinate and how we build for long-term impact. And then, in addition to the sort of defense of public health, I know that many of our community partners, grassroots organizations, are spending a lot of time thinking about dreaming and building what the kind of the co-governance models will look like in the future. And so I hope that for our public health department, our government colleagues, not to lose hope, because I think this is the time when, yes, we can work on the defense and at the same time work on dreaming and building a new way forward in terms of what health looks like, in particular in communities, right? Not just in government. And so those are my kind of reflections in terms of what's necessary now, and I think into the future.
Thank you, Monica. You mentioned the need for us to build new ways of building power that centers community. And I really wanted to highlight that because I think that was a beautiful, beautiful way of framing it. For the folks who are still with us on the call, we want to thank you for staying in and locking in for this long, and want to name that we are running a little bit over and asking if y'all can stay around for just a little bit longer so we can hear from all of our panelists. And for anyone who has to leave at the top of the hour, we will be sharing the recording and resources afterwards. Theo, I'm going to invite you up, and we're asking you to share some examples to effectively work with government institutions to advance work on the ground.
So I'll give a brief example from when I first joined BROC. BROC was part of a coalition that was trying to bring paid sick leave to workers in Philadelphia. And we kicked off our efforts with a report called Behind the Kitchen Door, which was based on surveys and interviews with hundreds of restaurant workers. And we released that report at a High Road restaurant with support from local stakeholders, including public health officials, city council champions, and other community organizations. We mobilized this full strategy to educate council members on the need for paid sick leave. We highlighted High Road restaurant employers that were providing paid sick leave already. When there was this was pre-pandemic, but there was a virulent strain of the flu that was hitting the country. And so we worked with the health department to hold vaccine clinics, flu vaccine clinics for restaurant workers, and highlight the need for workers to be able to stay home when they were sick. And we worked with other agencies to expose bad actors who were lobbying or who were pushing against this effort, right? This effort actually took it passed through city council twice and was vetoed twice by Mayor Nutter at the time, Mayor of Philadelphia, but we kept organizing, I think really looking at all of the elements of the 5 dimensions that were highlighted previously. And what ended up happening is that on the 3rd round, the mayor convened a task force, a paid sick leave task force, and we were part of that task force that then looked at proposals for city council, and our presence ensured that restaurant workers were included in the final legislation, which was the first time that restaurant workers were fully included in paid sick leave legislation. They'd previously been either completely written out as hospitality workers or written out due to the size of industry. And so, just shows that sort of that connection, that multi-dimensional connection, which allowed us to really develop, to bring this effort to a successful conclusion. And it's something that we saw repeated in Minnesota when we worked to raise the wage. And I think looking at these task force, the time when we've been invited on task forces, it's been when industry has been significantly opposed to any effort to improve working standards. And the administration power needs some sort of mechanism to provide cover to see changes in public policy. And so, it's this multi-layered approach that allows us to have the power to participate in those spaces.
Thank you. And thank you for emphasizing how oftentimes in our organizing work, there is often a relationship with both the inside and outside, especially as it relates to actually getting our wins implemented and cemented. So I appreciate you for bringing that into the space. Sunny, dear, it's your turn. While working on code enforcement in St. Louis, you recognize the importance of building strategic partnerships with people in government to support your community-led campaigns. In building relationships with organizers in government, how have you navigated the difficult feelings community members have when dealing with government? Do you have a success story to share?
Yes, I could. This is a really funny question to me because I just remember the conversations I had with residents around their hesitation with working with city government, and they would just flat out like our executive director would flat out just say it in their face and be like, "I don't trust ya." And so that was really funny. But yeah, I think the way that I went about bringing these two populations together was, first, I did one-on-ones with every single person that was going to participate in the coalition and the collaboration. And that's just like a basic organizing skill that they teach you when you first start off. So I sat with every single person and I listened to them. And when it came to the residents, I listened and I affirmed what they were, their experience of working with city government, because it's their reality. And communities, especially communities of color, have every right to not trust city government because what has happened to them historically. So I listened, I affirmed, and also when I finally brought them into a space together, we established what our decision making was going to be. Oddly enough, everybody wanted to do consensus. And then we also discussed like what are our values, and in those moments people were able to see that, hey, we actually have some similarities. It was city government alongside residents both saying like racial justice and racial equity should be a part of what we do. I also made sure that there were opportunities for us to not just do work together, but also to engage in just like building camaraderie. So we would have like social or happy hours where we could all attend and be in community with one another. I think those were some key pieces that I did to try to navigate the hesitancy. I will also say that Tennis Transforming Greater St. Louis already had pre-existing relationships with residents, that there was already trust built. So if we said, hey, we're going to do this, they were like, yeah, let's do this. So for those of you who may not already have those pre-existing relationships, it's going to be important that you spend time to build that initial rapport. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunny. I'm hearing you say that oftentimes the bread and butter of organizing, the one-on-ones, the relationship building, the shared decision making, that those are the tools that can strengthen the inside-outside relationship. So to me, that means listen to organizers. That's what I heard. So thank you for that.
I'd also add, although we chose a consensus building decision making model, there are other ways you can do it. Like there's first of all, you do have to acknowledge that there is a power dynamic at play. And sometimes when city steps into the room, people silence themselves or they go with what the expert says. So you can also do decision making models that is like a vote and that weighs the resident or whoever the impacted group in that setting is, that weighs their votes more heavily than those who are considered like experts. Because let's be for real, residents are experts too.
Right. Thank you for that addition. Jamila, I'm gonna pass it to you to close us off. And can you tell us more about philanthropy's role in this? Why is equity and justice so essential for public health practice, and how is it related to inside-outside strategy?
Sure. So this is a big question. This is a big question, a big set of questions. I think philanthropy's role, in my view, is really, we have the responsibility and the flexibility and opportunity to fund things that we think are innovative, to identify effective strategies. And I want to say, when I say innovative, like not new, but things that you just normally can't do because there are bureaucracies and structural barriers. So I think we have an ability to be adaptable and like kind of flex around those. I think based on Sunny, what you were saying is like also philanthropy has a responsibility to help subvert traditional power dynamics, really like fund work that is pushing the norms of like what power and what city governments or government in general does, and say, hey, we're flipping this inside out, and giving communities control and decision making. That's who's funded, so they get to decide. And I think we also can distill learnings from all of this work that we're funding to scale up strategies and to make work like inside outside strategies more mainstream and just more, and when I say mainstream, like more routine, how we do the work. And I think at our best in philanthropy, we're good at providing seed funding to help people not just think outside the box, but to work outside the box and put these ideas. I'm thinking about like Julian, like all the great ideas people have working in public health, and they can't get them done because the government agency funding the work won't let you. But philanthropy has an opportunity to really give you that platform to do that kind of work. And I think, and as an example, I'll quickly say at De Beaumont, we're working in partnership with Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and 4 Cities on an inside-outside strategy. That is our Made for Health Justice initiative. So it's working to transform the data as we understand it. And our communities in Portland, Tucson, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh are working in partnership with allies in local government. So they are community power building agencies. They have the grant. They got to decide who they wanted to work with in local government, how they wanted to work with them. And the end game is to take on issues like educational achievement for youth, climate justice, housing quality, workforce development, and do it their way and collect and utilize data in ways that are community governed and community owned. And I will put a link in the chat for folks who are interested in that, in data justice work and how MADE works. But that just brings me to why equity and justice are so essential for public health practice and inside outside strategy. I want to say that as is discussed in the guide, in the 5 Dimensions guide. Public health is rooted in social justice. Monica talked about us as superheroes, and I was thinking the same thing, that every superhero has an origin story. And for those working in public health, if we're superheroes, then social justice is our origin story. And so we need to rediscover and embrace social justice origins. They are the key to helping us build relationships on the inside and the outside. The social justice roots of public health are so compelling. They were at the heart of why fights for fair pay, for better working conditions, for better housing, clean water. So why would we abandon that history when it's really central and like the power that can propel us in the work? So if there's anything the current environment should teach us, and Asamia spoke to this earlier, is that public health has and always will be political. If we're blind to that, or if we try to pretend that we're neutral, we're really just giving up our power to change things. We're giving up our ability to energize potential allies who can be really like motivated, inspired to join us in the work. And the last thing I want to say is that we have never been above the fray. Public health has never been above the fray. The fray is about us. And so we really need to embrace that and claim it and lean and just use that to propel us forward.
Jamila, oh my God. What a great way to close out our panel. That was amazing. I don't even know what quote to pull out. It was all brilliant. It was all amazing. It was both an invitation and an indictment of where public health is currently. And I just think it was a beautiful way to just wrap up this whole webinar. We want to thank Sunni, Jamila, Monica, and Theo for joining us today, for contextualizing inside-outside strategy, for showing how inside-outside strategy work has been happening, and to amplify how much more work we need to do and how far we need to go. So deep appreciation to our panelists and deep appreciation to all of you all. I'm going to pass it to Julian to close us off.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we are already over time. I'm so grateful for everyone who shared your words and your wisdom, and for everyone who joined us here today and stayed late. This is just the beginning. This tool is being launched into the world, and we know that there will be so much follow-up. We're excited to hear from you. We're excited to work with you. We're excited to hear examples. There's so many ways that inside-outside strategy can play out, and we are excited to be supporting people in that work, bringing people together and convening to share tips and tactics and build that strategy together. There is so much to be done, but we have an amazing crew of folks with you all here who are ready and able to do that work. And we're excited to be doing that with you. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Margot, and thank you, Vero, for interpreting as we talk way too fast, as always. And thank you to everyone at HIP who supported the creation and bringing this resource into existence, especially our amazing communications team. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Clara. And thank you to all. With that, we are going to wrap up. Take care. See you soon. And there's more to come. Peace.
Take care.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. We need like a